Scott. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Eric.
So Jeff was in Hawaii last time. He's in San Francisco this time. Remind me where you're coming from.
I'm in Santa Monica. So
Santa Monica.
Half as good as Hawaii and a little bit, maybe halfway better than San Francisco.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I'm in Wisconsin, so any of those sound just fine to me.
Yeah.
And, we talked with Jeff about, encoding.com's been around for 13 years. And Penthera's been around since, I believe, about 2005.
Yeah, that's about correct. We're just about 10 years old.
Okay. So, streaming media and Penthera have worked together off and on over the years. And again, it's always great to see how these companies grow and change and shift with the changes and trends in the industry. And so what we're going to talk about for the next 15, 20 minutes is rethinking ad insertion for connected TV. So you've got a long history in the video delivery space, working with big OTT services like Showtime, Paramount Plus, Fox. As the CTV and video advertising spend grows, what are the biggest challenges that OTTs are facing right now?
Well, thanks for asking. And this also kind of goes to the shift that we as a company are undertaking. So, our history of the business was in quality of experience. Our oldest product is our download product, which enables offline viewing of SVOD assets. And over the past few years, we've undertaken both engineering and sales and business development efforts to bring forward new products and enter new spaces. On the OTT side and CTV side of the marketplace, sort of looking at entertainment with rapid growth, there are some critical areas that they need to focus on. Clearly, AVOD is a critical path, and we see companies like Discovery, HBO, and others that have come out and said that they believe they'll make more money from their ad-supported tiers than their pure SVOD tiers. We also know that keeping users engaged is a really big issue for CTVs. What I want to be able to focus on in this conversation, and thus the title, is really about the advertising elements of that, because advertising for a lot of companies is the main, if not only, driver of revenue for them. And we look at this space and we see that there are a couple of key areas that OTTs need to really focus on. One is delivering a better advertising experience, and we'll talk about what that means a little bit later in the conversation. And the second is really understanding how monetization works, particularly for video on demand, because the monetization process for video on demand is quite different than for any other digital type of distribution that they may have. The biggest challenges, I think that maintaining the user experience is always an important and critical challenge. As we know, maintaining a user experience drives longer sessions and therefore overall increase in revenue. The complex ad ecosystems that are being built up around these systems are also an area that needs to be focused. There's a lot of new technology and a lot of complexity in what drives ad decisioning and ad delivery. And the structure of how these decisioning engines works, focusing on that can produce meaningfully better outcomes. None of this is really simple to address. And our view is that in order to address all of it, you need to take kind of a holistic approach.
Right. And, it's also interesting to see over the course of these events, different themes pop up and kind of run through different panels and sessions. And advertising is one that has been consistent. Just this morning, we had a panel asking how can subscription services survive and thrive in a world that's increasingly turning to AVOD and FAST. And there were 5 representatives from 5 different subscription services on the panel, and all 5 of them agreed that at some point, virtually every subscription-based service is going to have to embrace advertising.
Yeah, I would think so, right? I mean, there's only so many subscription services that any one household can support, but they'll still want to see that content, even if they're not subscribed. So having an option for either a much lower price or a pure AVOD tier begins to make a lot of sense.
Right, absolutely. And another theme that has arisen over the course of the last few days has been that complexity that advertising brings into the picture. As you mentioned, I think complexity and complex and complicated 3 times in your, in the last couple of minutes. And yeah, the ad delivery ecosystem is very complicated, and that can make it difficult for OTTs to optimize their revenue. So how should those OTTs evaluate KPIs like fill rate and failure in order to maximize their revenue?
Well, the OTT should be looking at those metrics clearly. But the challenge is that there are a lot of sort of root cause problems that hide behind some of those metrics. So looking beyond purely the KPIs is important. So I'll give an example. Right now, today, we see two major trends in the marketplace. One is the shift to server-side ad insertion. And there are some clear reasons why you want to do that. You are able to produce, by using server-side ad insertion, a user experience that's akin to how they see broadcast television. There's seamless transition between content and advertising. You can do a lot of interesting things around the targeting of advertising using server-side ad insertion. And it's also less prone to problems that occur in client-side ad insertion. Alongside that, we also see a large trend towards programmatic, and a lot of that is being driven by the rapid growth in consumption. All right, so as consumption grows, so do the number of available ad spots, and oftentimes the direct sold or the direct sales teams at many of these publishers aren't capable of filling all those ad spots efficiently. So a lot of publishers are turning to programmatic in a number of different forms for filling out their inventory. And these two changes have some meaningful impacts. So what ends up resulting is a scenario where there are a lot of things that can occur that are difficult to track down. So you as a publisher might have multiple SSPs or supply side platforms that are dealing with multiple demand side platforms. You'll have an ad stitcher, you'll have an ad server, you might have a header bidding solution. And it becomes quite difficult to track down where problems are occurring. And, for example, render rates. A render rate is defined as the number of ads that were actually shown divided by the number of ad decisions that, say, your ad server made. And what we see on video on demand with large publishers is oftentimes they'll have render rates that are 40 or 50% less than the ad decisions that are being made on the ad server. And that's problematic. So it's problematic because they're trying to understand, why are the ads not rendering? Is it a problem at the SSP level? Is it a problem at the ad stitcher level? Is it just due to the fact that someone got halfway through a piece of content and exited? But just looking at the render rate hides some of those underlying problems.
Right. And, also there's some complexity with just decisioning and delivering those ads. And delivering that seamless user experience. There was a time a couple of months ago when a major hybrid OTT service, whose name I won't mention, consistently, when I would watch it, every time we got to an ad break, the ad break would throw off the audio sync and we would have to back out and come back in when we return to the content. So, is there something specific to VOD that makes the ad decisioning and delivery process even more complicated?
Well, not naming that publisher, or that platform, there's a large platform that uses a proprietary ad framework that's akin to client-side ad insertion. And that's an example of a problem that occurs. And that's why you see this shift to server-side ad insertion. But as I mentioned before, video on demand and using server-side ad insertion operates differently from any other digital delivery mechanism. And there are two aspects of that that are meaningfully different. One is there's a very small amount of time to make ad decisions. And second is the timing of when those decisions are made are displaced meaningfully from when the ad is going to run. And so I'll walk you through the process at a very high level to understand that. So when you start a video on demand stream and there's server-side ad insertion being used, all of the ad decisions occur in between the time that you press play on that video on your device and the first frame of that video showing up. Now, to make sure that the user, isn't sitting around for 5, 10, 15 seconds, that process, and there's a lot that happens in that process. The ad stitcher has to receive the request, it transmits the request to an ad server. The ad server looks internally, looks externally to programmatic channels, comes back, makes a bunch of decisions, transmits that back to the ad stitcher. The ad stitcher then has to get the ads and encode them, either encode them if they're new, or just stitch them into the manifest if they're already on their servers. All of that has to happen in a really compressed time period. So the timeout limits that are set for each one of these decision points are set very tightly, so that the round trip typically takes between 1.5 and 3 seconds. And so there's a bunch of stuff that can happen in that process that can go wrong. So at the ad server level, because you're making decisions for an ad that might not run for 6, 15, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, depending on how long the content is, the decision engine at the ad server level and the budgeting and pacing algorithms are actually eliminating campaigns from eligibility. On the programmatic side, it gets even more complicated because you're asking systems that have been fundamentally designed to essentially make individual discrete advertising, buying, and selling decisions. You're asking those systems to make decisions about multiple opportunities simultaneously. So you're asking effectively the demand systems to decide on 3, 4, 5 ad pods simultaneously without knowing whether it won one, a few, or all of them. And so what ends up happening is that the decisioning process and the behavior of those systems changes so that publishers will see an uneven distribution of responses coming in from those systems. And what that can mean is that you would have, say, overfilled ad pods and underfilled ad pods. But because you have these overfilled ad pods, and you may even have enough advertisers in that overfill to allocate across the ad pods, but because they've been bought on an ad pod or sometimes even on a position in that ad pod basis, the ad server cannot reallocate those ad placements. And so at the end of the day, what ends up happening is you get lack of fill, and you have problems where, because of lack of competition, the CPM rates in some ad pods are depressed. All of these factors are generally outside of the publisher's control. And this is one of the areas that we looked at, and we recognized that we could bring forward a solution that can actually address these problems in a meaningful way.
Okay, so those are problems that affect the publisher and the advertiser. You know, we talked a little bit about user experience problems. Do you think there's a connection between user experience and revenue that publishers need to monitor closely?
Yeah, there's a direct connection, and Conviva did a great job in their state of streaming reports of outlining this. And what you see is that small rebuffering events and small changes in image quality lead to stream abandonment at fairly high differentials. And so there is this direct correlation between the ability to monetize and providing a good user experience. So the better the user experience, right? So for example, in your example that you gave, where you had to constantly exit the video because of the audio track getting dislocated, or the video breaks, or there's a long pause when the ad is loading up. Mm-hmm. All of those problems result in people abandoning streams. And this is critical for AVODs, because if you abandon the stream, then you're basically eliminating the opportunity to monetize the rest of that stream that's been abandoned. Publishers also need to make sure that they're providing, the best streaming experience. So some of that is on the quality of experience, what we think of as eliminating buffering and stalls, and some of that is on the quality of experience of the advertising elements, to make sure that they're not disruptive to the immersive experience that we all, enjoy by watching streaming media. Aside from that, they also need to focus on the monetization. If you're not monetizing effectively for every single ad opportunity that you're presented with, that when people do leave the stream, either because of problems or they just have to go and eat dinner, you're missing out on revenue opportunities.
Now, we talked about user experience. Penthera, your DNA is sort of built around video delivery and quality of experience. So how are you leveraging that experience to innovate and bring new technological solutions in the ad space?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. We have this background of having very advanced capabilities which can manage how a player is consuming video assets. And we took the time to understand those capabilities really at their core level, not at what the functional output of them is and the sort of the goal of those functions as we initially designed them. And by abstracting them and then looking at the problems that are occurring in advertising, we came to a realization that a lot of these solutions can aid in monetization and aid in monetization in innovative ways that maybe haven't been necessarily considered by companies that are really focused purely on the advertising aspects. So we brought forward a number of monetization solution. So we have a download monetization solution. So that enables somebody to take an AVOD stream and watch it offline. And what our system does is it takes the ad load in that stream and refreshes it on a periodic basis to make sure that if someone hasn't watched it immediately after they download it, the ads won't be beyond their time to live window, as an example. We also have a streaming quality product that we've been able to apply to advertising. So our streaming quality product, which you call Play Assure, essentially looks at the environment that the player is in and prefetches some of the AVR stream ahead of the player's cache to make sure that there's always something there for the player to consume. And that can be applied both to the actual content stream as well as the advertising elements of that stream. And then the newest product that we have is something that we call Second Look, which is specifically designed to solve problems in server-side ad insertion on VOD. And our unique position has enabled us to do something that's kind of really quite novel. And what it's enabled us to do is to time shift the time of when you need to make decisions for ad delivery in VOD and expand the timing, the time allocated for making those decisions. And this can have a really profound effect on outcomes in terms of revenue generation, in terms of fill, and in terms of overall CPM. So, we've brought these products forward because we've been able to leverage our existing set of capabilities and know-how and bring forward some sort of innovative thinking into how we can solve some pretty complicated problems. All of them have been designed to work with the publisher's existing ecosystem of partners. So we're also at the same time not trying to bring forward a new decision engine, or we're not trying to disrupt their ad server or ad stitcher relationship. What we're trying to do is make those systems or enable those systems to operate more efficiently and produce better outcomes.
I have a follow-up about the download AVOD solution you offer.
Yes.
When I was doing a little research earlier, I was really pleased to see that because people do download things to watch later for all sorts of reasons. I mean, the classic example is you're going to be traveling, right? And but there are also people in low bandwidth locations for whom downloading something and then watching it later provides them a much better user experience.
Yes.
So, I was talking to Jason Press from HBO yesterday during our keynote about how you need to take all of these user scenarios into account. Am I understanding correctly with what you said about the timing of the creative, that, for instance, if on this coming Sunday, I download an AVOD show to watch, Monday is President's Day, if I watch it on Sunday, I may get an ad for a car maker that's got a President's Day sale. But if I wait until Tuesday to watch it, hopefully I won't get that ad. I'll get a replacement creative.
Yeah. So the way that works, and thank you for bringing up the aspects of download, right? So what we realized during the pandemic, when we thought that download usage was actually going to fall off precipitously, we actually saw it increase.
Really?
And we realized that there are a few things happening, right? People weren't traveling. So why are people downloading? And it's exactly for the reason you described, right? So I may want to watch something on Netflix and my wife and son are both watching Netflix and I can't watch it, but if I can have it downloaded onto one of my devices, I could watch it at the same time. Or what we saw in growth regions, right? Emerging markets, was the very use case that you described, where at home maybe you have bad bandwidth and the mobile plans are data intensive or very expensive for data. So we see people downloading in one place, whether it's work or at a coffee shop, and then they watch it offline. And so what we do with our download monetization engine is basically what you described. So there will be a time-based trigger that will trigger our system to go and refresh those ads. Typically, we like to have it on a 24-hour basis. So we're not, killing the device's part of downloading is to help alleviate the device's use of bandwidth. So we'll do it on every 24 or 48-hour basis. We would go and refresh all of those ads to make sure that, number one, they're not outside of their time to live windows, which are set on the buy side. And number two, we can keep ads fresh and number three, not impact the user too negatively in terms of consuming bandwidth.
Okay. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. Someone's asking about prefetched ads. If you're using prefetched ads, does that mean that there's minimal or less targeted selection criteria and not necessarily highly targeted ads?
No. So on the product where we're doing prefetching and it's essentially pre-caching of the ads, we're still enabling the same level of targeting, right? So you still know all of the attributes of the stream and the user or the device of the stream that you would normally know. The only thing that we're doing is before the ads need to run, we're making sure that they're actually on the device. So we're not prefetching them before the stream starts, we're prefetching them after the stream has begun. And the only key change there is that because we are prefetching them, the publisher needs to do client-side beaconing of the ads to accurately report them.
Okay. All right. Which programmatic ad services are you working with? That's an audience question.
So we are programmatic agnostic from the standpoint of our prefetching or pre-caching product, which is called Play Assure, or from our time shifting product called Second Look. Most of the work that we're doing is in between the publisher and the server-side ad insertion vendor. So we're not interrupting the decisioning flow. So as I described before, the ad request process works along these lines. The ad stitcher triggers that ad request to the primary ad server. The primary ad server might call multiple SSPs or a header bidding solution. We're not interrupting that flow at all. In future iterations of the product, there are pathways where we could see potentially working directly in some capacity with some of the programmatic guys, but for the initial version of the product, that's not a path we're going down.
Okay, and we have one more question. For low latency workflows, server-side ad insertion doesn't seem to be a good option. Penthera has tremendous experience working on the player side. Are you working on ways to do ad insertion for WebRTC at the client?
Good question. I don't know what WebRTC is.
Okay. Well, and I guess I should have asked the broader question first. Are you doing any work with live, or is it all VOD? Because
right, so
WebRTC is a low latency live protocol.
Yeah. So for live and fast channels, we are not doing anything yet.
Okay.
We are talking to a number of the ad stitchers, and we're exploring for future iterations how can we potentially solve some of the problems for live and linear ad stitching.
Okay, so watch this space. Notice that Scott did say yet.
Yeah.
Well, great, terrific. Thanks so much for spending time with us and talking about all the things that Penthera is up to, as well as the bigger picture and context that surrounds it with the increase in advertising supported video. I put Scott's email address in the chat. If you want to scroll up for it, you can grab it at scott.halpert@penthera.com.